Okay, and now we can open our committee of the whole work session here. It's 10:54, November 16th, 2021. And we have our minutes from October's meeting. And we also have a presentation that Commissioner Sullivan has put together. And this is a product of our racial equity work group. And I guess I'll just hand it over to Commissioner Sullivan here if you want to lead the way.
Thank you much, Mr. Chair. Well, this presentation was developed to share not just with the county board, but with our entire community, following a presentation to the community leadership group, sometimes known as Joint Powers. And we made this presentation in hopes that we will move forward to develop our own land acknowledgement statements for many organizations here in the county. So Dan Shirley, Commissioner Mills, Andrea Orist originally provided leadership for a racial equity group. And early on, last spring actually, this particular group, community leadership, had so many interests, we decided to divide up into two groups. And so one was the housing work group, and the other was racial equity. And so this group that focused on racial equity was meeting every other month, kind of gave ourselves homework assignments to research topics in between. And after a lengthy discussion, we agreed that there were three areas that we really wanted to focus on. And we wanted to focus on developing a land acknowledgement statement, looking at policy throughout organizations in our community, and to also talk about educating our community. So those were our three big areas to work on. And to date, we have finished the development of our land acknowledgement statement because that was our first priority. I was particularly interested in all of this work because of my passion pit for that particular work group, and some of just the personal efforts I've had throughout my tenure, not only here in the community, but in the educational community. And so again, land acknowledgement took kind of the center stage for our group, but we now know that after we share this information and organizations get to work on their own particular development of a statement, that we still have lots of work to do in the area of policy and education. I'm sure Commissioner Mills and I will be on this committee for years to come with racial equity. But we're feeling very confident and very positive about our movement as we go forward. So a land acknowledgement is an effort to recognize the indigenous people in the past, current, and also in the future related to a particular location, and to understand our place within that relationship. And as we began to research land acknowledgements, one of the more valuable resources that we saw as a group was nativegovernance.org. And we read a lot of print materials and reviewed videos and looked at resources under a tab they had called Land Acknowledgement and Beyond. We wanted to make sure that our land acknowledgement development focused on not only a written statement, but on what kind of action that statement might lead us to. We didn't know whether organizations would want to have an oral or a written statement, if they'd like it developed for meetings, to read at conferences or community gatherings. I guess that's up to every individual organization in our community. But we did feel it was really important for us to dig into the history, understand that thoroughly, and to understand that history that brought us to reside here in Cook County, and to understand our place within that history. And so our goal now is to share this land acknowledgement with other organizations. We have done many presentations already, and then to begin to take action. So the learning of the larger group for racial equity was so critical. We all had different personal experiences, different levels of understanding. So we went, as I mentioned, to nativegovernance.org. It's actually an organization located in the Twin Cities. We spent time with Tad Johnson, who all of you have spent time with, not only online with just him sharing information, but we went up to Grand Portage and had an opportunity to listen to Tad and an entire panel of presenters. And we did a lot of reading, personal exploration. We reviewed significant numbers of land acknowledgements from other organizations, and really felt that with the discussion and feedback we had within our group and also other organizations, like we connected with board members with ISD 166, we connected with Kimber as a representative of our healthcare community, but we tried to reach out and get discussion and feedback along the way to bring back to our larger group. Included in the resources that we reviewed were different kinds of recordings of speakers and events from all over the nation, as well as here in Minnesota. And we also looked at external resources from the Tribal Historic Preservation Office in Minnesota. We looked at the University of Minnesota Duluth Land Acknowledgement Statement, even territorial acknowledgements from Canada, our neighbor to the north. But I do have to say, at least for our small group, Tad Johnson was so influential and so helpful to our work. And we got to know Tad really well. And also were able to look at some of the presentations he's made and that were recorded through higher ed. But he's currently the University of Minnesota's Senior Director of American Indian Tribal Nations Relations, the Director of the Tribal Sovereignty Institute, the Director of Graduate Studies in the American Indian Studies Department, and he has been involved also at a national level with this type of work. He worked for 3 decades providing leadership and service to federal Indian law and policy. He is a tribal attorney, spent over 20 years doing that, a court judge and administrator, and he was staff director and counsel to the Subcommittee on Native American Affairs for the United States House of Representatives. So unbelievable credentials and service and commitment to us all. And he continually serves on boards for the Udall Foundation and Native Governance. And of course, he's an enrolled band member here in northeastern Minnesota. So in our work with Tad and in all of our reading and the recordings that we looked at and our discussions, we had 3 primary suggestions that really cropped up and seemed to be consistent through all of our work. The first thing was, do not sugarcoat the past. As we were working on our land acknowledgement statement, we came up with terms like genocide, ethnic cleansing, stolen land, forced removal. We looked at all of these, and people were a little reluctant to use some of those terms because they're uncomfortable. But it's okay to be uncomfortable, and we want to be authentic in the way we present the past. We also wanted to make sure that our indigenous people are not treated as something out of the past, that they are here today and they will be here in the future. They're thriving. And then we wanted our land acknowledgement statement to be positive. We can talk about the past, talk about unfortunate things that happened, but we want to move forward, and we want to make sure people are left stronger and more empowered because of any land acknowledgement that we would write. The examples that we focused most closely on as we studied land acknowledgements were Native Governance, the University of Minnesota, particularly UMD Duluth. We looked at Cook County Higher Ed's land acknowledgement, very, very well written. And Kelsey Kennedy provided us a little bit of history about how they worked through their land acknowledgement. the fact that they see it as a living document, that they're going to make mistakes, but they can change things in the future. And they have gotten feedback, which has been very valuable, as they have put that statement on their website and have used it at the beginning of particular meetings and presentations. Our racial equity work group focused on a land acknowledgement statement, again agreeing, start somewhere. Even if we make mistakes, it's better than doing nothing at all. So as we actually got into the nitty-gritty of writing this statement, individuals in our racial equity group developed their own land acknowledgement statements. Commissioner Mills, Dan Shirley, a number of people provided examples, and they were very well written, but there was not one statement that contained everything that the group felt was necessary. So we decided to create a small work group. Chris Lindholm from ISD 166, Nina McHugh, Kelsey Kennedy, and I developed a rough draft and worked together through a combination of in-person meetings and meetings that were held online. And we got input from stakeholders like the county, the school district that I mentioned, North Shore Health. We also spoke to Grand Portage, making sure that when we were representing Indigenous people that we used language they would approve of. We recognize this statement is our work. It's not the work of Grand Portage, but we did want to make sure that when we were referring to names that we did get input from them. And so we spoke with John Moran, we talked to Tribal Chair DeShaw, and also a number of other members of the community to make sure everyone was comfortable with our work. So we provided that input on our draft and wanted to make sure as we finalized our draft that we identified all the Indigenous people that were tied to Cook County. So we talked about the Grand Portage Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, the Dakota, the Decree, the people that came before the Anishinaabe. We wanted to consider the 1854 treaty, or the Treaty of La Pointe, and consider the right to hunt, fish, and gather in the ceded territory. And it's kind of interesting that we had so much discussion about the 1854 treaty, and just now MnDOT has put up signs throughout Cook County and other parts of the Arrowhead identifying that ceded territory. We had presentations that we put together, talked about events, websites, posters, handbooks. How are we going to use this statement? And again, thought each individual organization will need to make that determination if they choose to develop a land acknowledgement statement. So here is the statement, 2 paragraphs. We spent months on 2 paragraphs, making sure that it was thoughtful and that it was respectful and that it met all the criteria that were needed for an effective statement. We acknowledge that Cook County, Minnesota is located on the traditional lands of Indigenous people, including the Dakota, Cree, and Ojibwe people, most recently the Grand Portage Band of Lake Superior Chippewa, who have cared for and called this place home for time immemorial. This land holds great significance, and it was taken through exploitation. Indigenous people have not only survived here, but maintained a rich culture which continues to thrive. We embrace our opportunity to build relationships based on trust, consistency, and accountability, and offer allyship in a lifelong process of learning. And we support and advocate for the sovereignty of Indigenous nations that are forever connected to this land. So you'll note in that statement we, included the names of Indigenous people from past to present, and we acknowledged that the land holds great significance and how it was taken through exploitation. That little word exploitation, we had a tremendous amount of discussion about because it's uncomfortable. And not everyone feels comfortable with words that bring up discomfort. But now we are ready to move on. Cook County and ISD 166 are kind of taking a leadership role in this. And each of these organizations hopes to adapt our land acknowledgement, this particular 2 paragraphs, to fit the mission or the purpose of the specific organizations. It might be a paragraph before or after the land acknowledgement, but it's something that we as a county want to do to provide our mission and relate it to that land acknowledgement. We want to be positive. We want to begin to work with this so that hopefully in 2022, when we start out the new year, we can adapt this model, potentially approve our own statement, and share it with other members of the community. So far to date, we've shared this presentation, just this short snippet, with the Cook County Historical Society, the Passion Pit Advisory Committee, the Cook County Local Energy Project today here, and the City Council will be looking at this on November 30th. So it's really an opportunity for us to share with the broader community our work. And we feel like here in Cook County, if we look at our own purpose, our own mission, why are we all here as commissioners? We have the responsibility together as a body to oversee the operation and administration of our county and represent county interests at the state and federal level and participate in long-range planning and management of county budget and finances. As we all read that purpose statement, think about what it implies. If we do form a committee, which I would recommend, to look at this land acknowledgement statement, we want to include people that deal with the county budget. We might want to include Brady on that committee. Finances. We might want to include our county attorney to talk about language and the implications of any land acknowledgement statement that we develop. We might want to think about our highway department and land services as providing representation on a committee that would look at a land acknowledgement. They're all key players. So in hopes, we could develop in 2022 an advisory group to consider the development of our statement, its implications for the county, draft a statement and determine how we as a county might utilize it, and then make a recommendation to the county board. So that's kind of, in a real quick fashion, how we might move forward with this. So I just appreciate you allowing me a few minutes on our committee of the whole meeting today to present this, just as I have with other groups, and then take some time over the next few weeks to really reflect on the content of the presentation and think about how we might want to move forward and what our next steps might be. Thank you.
Can we go back to the land acknowledgement statement itself? And just a couple comments that I would want to share is just, originally I was hoping for something short and to the point, but as Commissioner Sullivan pointed out, it doesn't necessarily encompass everything that that we need to express in a real short and to the point. Bobby shared ILRAL's land acknowledgement statement, and that is very short and to the point, and I like that. But if we're really trying to give a little more context, then we do kind of have to give that broader perspective there. As far as the word exploitation, that's actually, in my mind, one of the tamer words that could be used, and that was thrown out there. There was,
but we did have pushback.
Yeah,
for that word,
yeah, so
and
it's
struggled with it.
Yeah, and yes, I am certain that people will have issue with that word because it's too harsh. But you know, for me, it didn't feel that way. And so, you know, as we are looking at this and kind of digesting it and you know, just sitting with it for, you know, for as long as we need to, hopefully not forever. Hopefully we'll get some more discussion.
I'm giving you a timeline,
Yeah,
early
yeah.
2022.
Yes, no, I think that's fair. You know, just try to reflect on, please, what I'm asking everyone to do is just reflect on some of the words. If you don't like them, try to dig into why that is, or if they make you feel uncomfortable, why that is. And just know that it is, you know, something that can be amended later on. We can modify it. But I really like the idea of bringing it to our staff and getting feedback there to see implications and how that would fit into our organization. I think that's a very important step before we adopt anything.
And I think it would be really important for a couple of commissioners to sit on an advisory group with other individuals representing other departments, you know, because this it will have implications on policy. And right away I think of human resources and the kinds of policies that come out of that department, and that's another key person to be on that advisory group. So again, this is just an opportunity for you to look at the statement, to be thinking about how do we move forward, what are our next steps, who might be key players to involve in an advisory group to us as a county board.
This is a lot to take in.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
So can we get a copy of this?
Absolutely.
Okay, I would need that, thank you.
Yep.
Because the word land governance is a heavy word. Governance means we're going to control, doesn't it? What does the word governance, land governance, actually mean in terms of how we address that in the county? Is it meaning what? I think of control, land governance, control. How was that discussed?
You mean as far as the Native Governance Center? Yeah, that's more of an organization as a resource.
Correct.
And so you know, in this statement, there isn't any mention of the governance. We're just acknowledging kind of the history and the present and the hopes for the future.
It's certainly something the advisory group might take a look at.
Implications of that. Yeah. But yeah, it's not. Oh,
No,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
I was just going to say it's nothing that we need to jump on, but I do hope that we can process and digest and bring up those questions, and we can discuss them more at a future date too. I don't think I think it's very fair to aim for early 2022.
I really think it takes time for all of us to read through this, to think about it, to look at our purpose as a county, and then to think about who are the key players that need to be part of an advisory group to analyze this. And Stacy, you as a former county employee might really have some great insight that I don't have as to who should be involved.
I don't know about that yet, but so I want to thank you for your work on this. And I know your committee struggled a lot, so this isn't the first time I've sat through this and asked my questions. So I appreciate the work on that. And I really did spend a lot of time yesterday on the governance center too, looking at wonderful stuff in there. My concern about this whole thing is the public doesn't even know this is going on. Unless you're part of the group. If you're part of it, those that know, I would like to really see more outreach to the general community.
And I actually thought about that. You know, WTIP is running a series on inequities here on the North Shore. And this might be the type of thing for them to look at in terms of, we recognize this, and this is the start to some action that we might take. And that might be a very helpful outlet.
And that's the other part that kind of concerns me. I was going through yesterday trying to figure out, okay, what does it mean for me as a county commissioner to say I accept this statement? How does it change the way I am a commissioner? And I'm thinking of some issues that maybe we voted on in the last few months and thinking, I don't know. Would it change those votes? I don't even know. So how can I ask somebody else to support this if I'm not really sure?
And that's why we need an advisory group to
But that's
study
what's
this.
concerning to me. It concerns me that we need an advisory group to tell our department heads we should be sensitive to the fact that other people lived here before we got here. To me, I grew up here. We knew this. Wasn't always talked about in the right way. History was not reported in the right way. I learned more through my grandmothers than I did through my school, which was unfortunate. So I'm glad to see people are talking about and speaking truth to what has happened in our county. But I don't think a land acknowledgement statement, the acceptance of it by this county board, should make a drastic change in how we make our decisions, because that concerns me about what we're doing wrong today. And I still haven't heard, what am I not considering correctly? What is it that other people are needing from me as a commissioner to make them think that I am trying to consider their interests? And I'm not really sure. So, and I was reflecting yesterday then on my work on the restorative justice, and it's all about the next step. It's one thing to issue an apology or an acknowledgement.
It's about the action, right.
You gotta go the next step and what are you gonna do about that?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that nobody can tell me yet or I don't understand, and I feel really bad that I don't even know what I'm doing wrong now. But obviously we need this to tell me I am. That's my struggle here.
And I don't think that's the intent of a land acknowledgement. I've never seen that anywhere, that it's about pointing out that somebody is doing something wrong. It's a lens for us to look through as we're making decisions. It's something to be thinking about as we're making our decisions. And it's going to cause us pause to think a little bit before we take action. I think about recently the highway department returning land to Grand Portage. I don't think this land acknowledgement statement would have changed that at all. It's almost like there's action being taken right now prior to the statement. But this is to help every organization, if they choose to adopt it, and again, make it fit with their mission, to cause us pause and think before we make a decision.
And we do, this board, I think, does an excellent job of that already. And to your point, Commissioner Hopkins, like, yes, before we adopt something, we need much broader public discussion and education. And so just starting talking about this will start that, hopefully. I would say almost certainly, but I'm just going to say hopefully there. But then yes, and then what after that? Like what difference does it make if you don't either use it or use that lens, or just trying to consider that as we are making decisions, like explicitly consider that as we're making decisions, versus just generally we're trying to see things from all angles, and just with the history that occurred, I think it's important for government bodies and public bodies to recognize that, and then try to make the best decisions we can with that in mind. And it's not saying that we're doing anything wrong right now, because, like I said, I think this is really thoughtful and contemplative board. But it just is almost like a tool to help our considerations. And it's not necessarily drawing a line in the sand either, you know. It's again just a lens to look through and be like, well, hopefully this will help people at least think more about it. And for some, that's maybe not necessary. For others, it could be helpful. And for others, it might just put up a wall, you know. So it's going to have different effects on different people. But I think it is an important step to try to right the wrongs of the past, or just continue building relationships, you know. But I mean, my perspective on it has changed so much over the time sitting on that, and I wasn't involved in drafting this particular statement, and it was, I know, very arduous. So I'm really grateful for that work. And even my perception of this perspective of this statement has changed as I've sat with it more. So I think your concerns are exactly what you should be concerned about, and exactly what we need to be talking about. And it's just a matter of kind of trying to absorb this and process it, and to think more about it. And I just want feedback from staff, just their thoughts. I mean, you can just be an email brainstorming session. I think it'd be much better to have a conversation, because it's easier to connect and to bounce ideas off faster, or concerns, and talk about those. But just getting that feedback, I think, is important to see what potential problems it may cause, or what. I mean, there could be very similar questions. Why do we need this? What is this going to do? Are you tying my hands for something? You know, like those types of concerns or questions may come up, and it's important to talk through all that. So.
Yeah, and to me, an example of this was when we had our recent meeting here in the past month or so down at Black Bear. And we got together with tribal leaders, and as an example, the folks from Carleton County, they had their Public Health and Human Services Director, and they had the Health and Human Services person from the Fond du Lac tribe that both stood up and talked together. And it was interesting because it was very meaningful, because what they've learned through time, just being sensitive and conscious to, if I'm going to change something, the person from their county level said, I've learned now I can change what appears to be something just very mundane and just for my office. Doesn't even affect any other office outside of ours, and yet I'll include the representatives from our local, you know, from the Health and Human Services, from the tribal services. And the reason is because what they found is even small changes as they interface makes a difference. And so it's that level of consciousness and awareness that if something like this brings that to you, great, because there's a lot of things that we do in all aspects of county government that come together and have to interface in some fashion, that if we're not cognizant of it, we may very likely make a change not knowing that it would cause a change there. So it's that questioning, as you said, just going that next step and just reaching out to your counterpart if there is one, you know, in those other examples. So we've been having discussions recently in permitting for land use and this type of thing, or for development. Opportunities, each of those are opportunities to reach out and see what we're doing today seems fine to me, right? But that's because I'm sitting in my own little world here. Let's talk to the others, you know, that are doing things. And like that, where they have permitting up on Grand Portage, we have permitting here in the county, and each of those alone doesn't get you the right to go develop land if it's within the boundaries of Grand Portage, right? Privately owned land in Grand Portage. You have to work together, and you have to find a way to connect together to make sure that work doesn't start until both sides have been met, as an example. I think these types of things bring that consciousness and awareness, if we get everybody, and it's education.
Yeah.
That's really what this is all about, is just bringing education and awareness will get us to that spot.
And that education doesn't stop.
No,
It absolutely does.
But in a lot of cases,
Yeah.
it hasn't begun.
Yeah.
Or if it
Yeah.
did, it was begun but left behind somewhere.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's where the awareness piece is so important.
And that's really where Tribal Chair DeShaw focuses on education as he talks about this, that this is a process to educate an organization, but also our broader community.
So we're also needing more of that, wanting more of it, and looking for how does that work? How does it fit? Where is it? It's very difficult to specifically identify what education is needed when it's just kind of a societal.
Well, you look at what AMC is working with in terms of planning for training for county employees.
That's right.
And that's the perfect example of starting with very basic information about tribal sovereignty.
Yep.
Treaties, getting that basic understanding and knowledge out to all of our employees. That's being rolled out at a state level, but there's currently nothing for county employees. And so this is our opportunity to be a part of that.
Didn't they offer, though, to do it here in Cook County? I thought Chairman DeShaw was going to.
Oh, no, they are.
Yeah.
We haven't done it yet.
Right.
We're still in the process of putting that together. It has not
Yeah, we're
occurred
still-
yet.
I think that would be extremely important for all of our county employees.
Oh.
To have,
We're all in
before
agreement.
you start,
Oh.
that's what, I worry about putting more pressure on our department heads. I know how much time you guys spent doing this. It's not easy work. And I worry about, let's assign department heads to another committee to do this next stage without the background of training of what does that really mean? I think it would be an excellent place for us to start saying, you know what, this is important stuff to our county and county employees, it's important you take this training.
Mhm.
And then let's have a discussion about how does that affect the way we do business? Does it? Is there anything we want to change about that?
Yeah, and I don't see any drastic change. It's just kind of that further lens or that further understanding of, or sensitivity, or there could be drastic things, but it's, and I hear what you're saying. Just like if we form an advisory committee. Before there's education, it's almost like that is the education before, and that's okay. I'm okay with that, but it may not be as effective as the formal AMC training. And so I don't have a strong feeling about forming the advisory group talking about this, but I do want to get this out to staff, just looking for feedback, just to get it out there and start talking about it. And then see where that goes, and see what the timing is for the AMC side of things, and just where everything can fit in. But there's, early on, I was just like, let's get this done, and that's not.
It took many months just for this.
Yeah,
It's a
process.
It's a process, and it's more than just education. It's also building relationships and having conversations with people. That's such a critical part of this.
And just one thing I wanted to bring up, and I think everyone's aware of it, is just that this conversation has actually been going on since before this board. It was previous board, and maybe the board before that. I don't know exactly the whole history there, but there were efforts before this kind of. Well, I guess it was largely when we hired James that the community leadership group got spurred again a little bit more. So it was before that there was a lot of work done already. And so some of the members on the racial equity work group had been a part of that group, and there was a little bit of frustration there, just because, hey, we've been talking about this, you know.
Yep.
But I think all in all, there's just been great participation and great discussion. For me, it really a lot of learning and perspective widening. So I think there's a lot of value there. And but there's no, where I was going with that, just trying to get it done, is there isn't, you know, there's no deadline on this. There's no fire under us. It's just that I've received public feedback during the unrest in Minneapolis about what is Cook County doing, and then I was just like, well, what are we supposed to be doing? Like, what is our role in the unrest that's happening in Minneapolis? And just in some little back and forths, there is an expectation that our organization should be more aware and more sensitive to the racial inequity in our community, and just talking about it, and just, you know, bringing it up to the level where people can I don't know, have an opportunity to learn more, and just to have those discussions. And I mean, I guess there's been plenty of demonstrations downtown on the highway too about that, and so it's just all, it's bubbling up, and we're feeling it and seeing it, and it's good to talk about it. So.
Good enough, yeah, a lot to take in, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anything more to add at this point, unless we have more thoughts, or I strongly regret missing the Black Bear meeting, because I feel a little bit out of the loop there, but just I feel out of step because of that. But
You continued.
yes,
It
right.
is.
It's not.
It is indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
And we do have a
Beginning.
planning meeting coming up in December
Yeah, we've
for
got a planning meeting, and
training for county employees.
They've set
so
the
we'll know
first,
more after
they've
that.
set the first training date in February, and we're, you know, that will be posted. In fact, I think it is posted on an AMC flyer that
AMC,
came out
yeah.
in your email. And so that's going to be coming up, but
And yeah, and so
progress is being made.
Okay.
And I've been really pleased at the engagement, and everyone wants to take the model that has been laid out for the state training and don't break it, mold it to what, you know, is appropriate. And as we've said earlier, doing something is better than doing nothing, and then, you know, check and adjust as you're going forward. But it's very important to bring this down to that level and get this started. And so I think the whole group is really focused around that and moving forward.
Yeah, I was under the impression it was more of like committee work, and so then I thought, okay, we've got representation there, so maybe I don't need to be there. But then it sounded like everyone else was there, and I was like, oh, why wasn't I there?
Well, they took the opportunity, because of the District 1 meeting that was going to occur,
Yeah.
to put it out to everyone and invite all the folks that would go to that meeting, and really broaden the perspective, and it just made for a completely different, you know, the whole essence of the meeting and everything changed because of the number of representatives there and things. I
Sure.
think it brought more focus and gravity to what we were doing, and to see the acceptance amongst the group of what we were moving towards. That went a long way as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, really pleased. And, you know, as Chairman DeShaw said before, that when he was a commissioner and was on the committee that was focused on the Native issues and this type of thing, and they had actually discussed disbanding the group completely because they were getting such low attendance at their meetings. And then to take that same meeting and to have the turnout that we had
The
at
room
that,
was
at
pretty
that
filled.
meeting was very gratifying to him, because he was one of the ones that stood up and said, no, we're just looking at this wrong. We got to do something different about what we're doing. And so I really, hats off to him to, you know, to keep this thing moving forward. And I think we're starting to get some engagement in the right thought process to make a difference. So, and that's what it's about. That's why you try to do these things.
Well, and so, as far as the AMC annual meeting then, is that something I should be at, or is that again, kind of just getting that?
This planning meeting is separate from that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and the planning meeting is a small group to try to, as with any of these things, when you get to the point where you
Okay.
need to make decisions and get final structure, doing that by a large committee is not very functional sometimes.
Well, that's what I thought the Black Bear thing was more, and so that's where my confusion is, so.
Well, we kind of had a smaller meeting ahead of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
there was a meeting at 1 and then at 2 o'clock.
I went to the 2
You went to
o'clock
the
one.
2
I
o'clock.
Correct.
really
Yeah, our smaller
feel
meeting was
grateful I
trying
came.
to nail down a couple of the things, and we were able to do that and then shifted into the larger meeting. But it carried over nicely that everyone was still engaged in
Well, I guess what I was looking for is clarity on if there is an opportunity at our AMC annual meeting that I should take advantage of, or if I should just cool my jets and wait
There's
for the
going
training.
to be a February training.
Okay, I'll wait for that. I'll cool my jets for February. And then, okay, that's what I was. Thank you for
that.
answering. Okay, well, yeah. So I'm just really grateful that we're able to talk about this and to keep it going. I didn't know, you know, I'm hoping we'll get more community engagement and just discussion, and then hopefully get some staff feedback here too, get some outreach, and just I want to be cognizant of
Yeah.
the burden on staff as well. Trying not to make a big ask, just looking for general feedback and thoughts and mulling it over for a bit. So we'll see.
Well, I'd just like to say for the record that, you know, I really support our movement in this direction. I think using that lens in our decision-making, both you as an elected board and us as an organization is super important, and I'm committed to that work. So however we need to move that forward, I'm on board.
Thank you. All right, well, that's about it for the committee of the whole today, unless anyone else has any thoughts, further thoughts.
Just thanks again.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks for meeting in a circle, so it's easier for me to.
No,
Yeah.
it's a great suggestion.
Just work.
Well,
It does.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
just makes me feel
It
better.
A
does.
circle and a square doesn't really hard to make a circle. And in the
Yeah.
future, we could do a talking stick.
Yeah,
Oh.
we could do a circle with a talking stick, and I have one.